There have been so many tales told about individuals and groups over the years, some good, some bad, and some indifferent. Within most of the groups there are always different types of individuals, some great leaders, some who aspire to climb up the ranks, and some who just see their faction as just a place of safety or something they just couldn't imagine living without. For one individual, however, this faction gave him everything faster than anyone could have imagined, and because of it he rose the ranks incredibly fast, all thanks to his sheer intelligence. But despite having everything pretty quickly, one event would see him lose it all in a heartbeat, and from that point in, his life's mission would be to seek ultimate revenge, trying everything he possibly could to punish those who destroyed him and his faction's ambitions. This path would see him seek out the most advanced technology ever, the most brutal individuals of the wasteland, and one of the most mythical locations within the whole of America. This individual would be known as Father Elijah. So who is Father Elijah? What was his role? How did he lose it all? And what happened to him in the end? Well, in today's video, we will explore the story behind the incredibly intelligent individual and paint a picture of the legacy he left behind. This is the story behind the intellectual genius known as Father Elijah. Elijah's story starts when he became a scribe within the Brotherhood of Steel. The role of a scribe within these factions was essentially to create and keep records of the technology used by the Brotherhood. The end goal for many of the scribes was to essentially become a head scribe, the highest ranking civilian class of the Brotherhood of Steel. For all scribes, however, this is the highest they can possibly go within the faction. However, for Elijah, this is where he broke the trend and did something no one else has done in the history of this faction. Elijah rose to the rank of Elder, which was only really reserved exclusively for paladins. This was a huge honor, and the reason for why Elijah was given this privilege was simply due to the fact that he was an absolute genius who could figure out a new piece of technology just by looking at it. This was all helped with the fact that Elijah himself was obsessed with learning about new technology, and because of that would constantly send out scribes to retrieve tech he was looking for or had heard about. But the difference with Elijah was that instead of just preserving that technology, which was seen as the norm within the Brotherhood, he would work on it, improving it, and putting it to use, which to many people within the faction was seen as extremely unorthodox. This mindset made him an outcast with many of the other high-ranking members of the Brotherhood, as Elijah would be determined to develop new technologies, such as ethically questionable weapons. With this, the other elders had to step in to silence him, but instead of stripping him of his ranks or disposing of him, they would send him away from the main base and put him on a mission within the East to create a new chapter for the Brotherhood within the Mojave Wasteland. On his route and setting up within the East, it quickly became apparent to those he took with him that Elijah was a deeply unpleasant man and leader, as he would be an absolute control freak and would view everything like it was a machine, deeming those of lesser rank as just a tool for him to use and ignoring any of their human factors, making them do any task he requires, regardless of how impossible it looked or how hazardous it may seem. If anyone were to refuse him or get a bit hostile towards him due to the tasks he asked them to do, Elijah would get incredibly infuriated by them and how they did not honor him as their leader. On top of that, Elijah also hated any face-to-face interactions, making sure that any time he interacted with someone, it would be through a terminal screen or simply by text, meaning that even giving out mission directives, he would still never meet the scribes in person. It would only be through some text on a screen, a terminal call, or video message. There was only one member of his chapter that he would speak face to face with, and that was his pupil, Scribe Veronica Santangelo. However, majority of the time their interactions were still through the use of a terminal. During her time as his pupil and in her early years, Veronica was involved in a relationship with fellow Brotherhood member Christine Royce. However, that quickly came to an end, with many believing it was due to Elijah's involvement and rank, forcing her to end her relationship so that she could join Elijah on his journey to the Mojave Mojave. Not knowing about what truly had happened between her and Christine, Veronica followed Elijah's leadership and only grew in admiration for him, learning much from his leadership and interactions with new technology. But Elijah had not just been sent out to the east to get him away from the main base. The other elders had also sent him on a mission to investigate the significant landmark that was the Hoover Dam, in the hope that he could bring it back to full functionality. But getting to the Mojave, Elijah would discover something that would horrify him. Someone had beaten him to it, the NCR. Claiming it for themselves, Elijah would be furious, stating that it was like children playing with a bomb, believing they were simply not smart enough to hold such a powerful bit of technology. But knowing there was nothing he could do, Elijah turned his chapter's focus onto another vital technological hotspot within the area, this being the Helios 1 solar power facility. Taking the facility, Elijah once again became obsessed with it, as well as desperately trying to defend it from the rapidly growing NCR forces, making their way into the Mojave. Because of this goal that Elijah had in mind, he would go on to ignore the rapid expansion of the Van Graff family, the largest merchant houses and crime families within New California, who had now entered the area distributing pre-war deadly energy weapons. Having his focus on the Helios power facility, Elijah's new goal was to unlock the full secrets of the power plant and get it operational once again. But this did not go unnoticed, and with it, the NCR took action knowing full well this was not defensible, which Elijah also knew, but refused to move from it, dooming his people in the process. With this, the NCR launched their operation named Operation Sunburst to drive the Brotherhood out of the facility and ultimately out of the area. With the operation now underway, the Brotherhood fell victim to attack after attack from the NCR, desperate to take the facility. Sending in waves at a time, the NCR outnumbered the defenders by a factor of between 15 and 20 to 1, causing many losses on both sides of the conflict. Eventually, one of the senior paladins named Hardin recommended fighting a retreating action to save the chapter, but Elijah refused and ordered that all the troops remained in the area to dig deep and fight off the invaders and defend the facility, as he had supposedly almost had it working, but not specifying exactly what he had almost got working. Amazingly, the Brotherhood continued to face off the NCR and were defending the facility extremely well. However, with countless attacks hitting them, the Brotherhood were running low on munitions and were eventually going to run out, leaving them defenseless. But Elijah wasn't just sitting silent during the battles that were going on. In fact, during the attempts made by the NCR, he would desperately seek out a weapon that would wipe out the NCR completely, and during this time he indeed found the answer he was looking for within the plant itself. In it, Elijah would find plans for the satellite weapon that would be known as Archimedes 2, that was the secret hidden within the plant. With the weapon, Elijah could surely fight off the NCR and allow his chapter of the Brotherhood to thrive completely. Trying desperately to get the weapon working, it would not come to pass, as the NCR finally broke through their perimeter, meaning victory was imminent. Looking for the leadership they needed, it quickly became apparent that Elder Elijah had disappeared during the battle and fled somewhere. No one knew exactly where he had gone, but they had been abandoned and were now victims of the NCR. Not giving anyone any warning, even Veronica, many believe he had just deserted the Brotherhood and was seen as a coward, showing everyone who he really was as a person. Eventually, Nolan McNamara took over the leadership role and led the surviving members of the battle to their new home within the Mojave, this being within the Hidden Valley. But the truth was, Elijah hadn't deserted the Brotherhood at all, at least not in his eyes anyway. Instead, he was on a solo mission to find something for them, to hit back against the NCR and to help rebuild them from scratch. He also did not want to see the power station abandoned, and with all of these factors, set out on a mission to bring back the glory of his Brotherhood chapter. But for now, he viewed the recent events in a realistic way, believing that currently the Brotherhood was doomed and they needed to begin again. But to do this, he would have to do anything he could to make sure it happens. This included completely unethical weapons and morally questionable means to make sure it was possible. Setting off on his mission, Elder Elijah the Deserter ventured as far as the Divide and spent a long time among the ciphers, hoping that he could find just one thing he could use to hit back against the NCR, but nothing was to be found. That was until we made it to the old world technological powerhouse that would answer all of his prayers. This would be the Big MT. After venturing through the divide and spending some time amongst the ciphers, Elijah would find himself within the Big MT, an area that was absolutely filled with some of the best pre-war technology the world had ever seen. Elijah was in his element here, as he was surrounded by some of the most advanced machines and working pieces of equipment he had ever seen in his life. Although arriving there, he would be quickly captured by the think tank, who wanted to know why he was there. But this did not last long, as Elijah managed to escape within mere seconds thanks to his incredible intelligence, shocking the brain bots in the process. Venturing over the whole of the Big MT, Elijah would not only witness all of the technology there, but he was also going to encounter another human within the area. This human being the courier known as Ulysses, who would go on to speak to Elijah about what he had witnessed on his travels. During this, he would name a place that was seen as legend, a mythical place many did not know truly existed, that being the Sierra Madre. And when telling Elijah of this place, would also convince him to journey there to find what he ultimately seeked out. But before Elijah ventured out there, he had to make some preparations, and whilst doing that, ventured toward Little Yangtze to see if he could work out an experiment he had in mind. When getting there, Elijah would capture some of the survivors of the nearby prison camp and place explosive collars on them. When he did this, Elijah found himself getting curiouser and curiouser with his new experiments. With the collars now fully operational, his next goal was to seek out a radio frequency until finally he would track down a faint broadcast. Making his way through the local area, he would go on to avoid all of the local robots of the area, whilst also suffering a major migraine that he had gotten through taking many mentats along the way, and eventually on his travels was able to fine-tune both the collars and the radio signal to be effective for him in his overall goal. Elijah had now located the Sierra Madre signal through the radio broadcast, and now with his new explosive collars ready to be used on unsuspecting guests, his plan of defeating the NCR was getting closer, as it was finally time to seek out the secret weapon that was housed in the mythical place. But little did Elijah know that during his exploration over the wasteland, his crimes had not gone unnoticed, and in fact were picked up by the Brotherhood, who had discovered his whereabouts. Because of the horrific crimes he had committed during his travels, such as experimenting on prison survivors, the Brotherhood sent out a group of assassins to stop him once and for all, one being the once lover of his pupil, Christine Royce. Not only that, but the think tank also sent out robots to contain him for what he had done within the Big Empty. Seeing them all come through the sight of his sniper scope, Elijah knew he had to take action, and utilizing his explosive collars on his subjects, he would detonate them to cause a distraction and make his getaway, as Christine's assassination attempt had begun. In the end, Elijah's use of technology and strategy worked, as he was able to defeat Christine, as she would be punished by becoming a subject for medical experimentation after being dragged away to the Y-17 medical facility. With the assassination attempt now over, Elijah ventured on and set up camp on the roof of the Signal Hills transmitter, and then later on the cliffs near the Big Empty North Tunnel, which was beneficial to him, as some uncontrollable broken and berserk Securitrons provided him a defense from anyone trying to get to him. With the Big Empty robots getting closer by the minute, it was time for Elijah to take action, as he would go on to hack into the think tank's mainframe, frying Dr. 8's voice module and rerouting Dr. Zero's processors in order to gain access and control of the area's train network. Successfully doing this, Elijah was able to direct a train into one of the tunnels and created himself a path for his escape through the wreckage. Eventually, Elijah was able to venture on his mission to get to the Sierra Madre, leaving behind his precious lair rifles and jury-rigged Tesla cannon. But for now, that did not matter. He was finally on his way to get to the place Ulysses had told him about, and together with his Gauss rifle and knowledge that he could make the Mojave his and his alone, he set off. But one last bit of preparation had to take place before he could enter the casino itself. During this, he renovated an abandoned Brotherhood of Steel bunker as a base of operations for himself out within the Mojave. This would be where he experimented on all of the new technologies he would come into contact with and could make his own. This would also be the place where he could come back to after venturing to the Sierra Madre on round trips, a place where he could be able to analyze the mysterious cloud that was surrounding the mythical city. The cloud was significant. It was to be the weapon he needed to take out the NCR. But how did it work? This base of operations needed to be the place where he could study it without interference. But just doing that would not be enough. He needed to get into all of the Sierra Madre for good, to study its environment and see what was in the contents of its casino and vault. But before he left, he would go on to leave one final message for Veronica in the event he did not return. And with that done, it was now time for his mission within the area of the Sierra Madre. Getting to the Sierra Madre for the first time, Elijah was in awe of everything. It was everything he had hoped for and more. The mysterious cloud he had been told about had preserved the city perfectly and kept all of its materials in perfect order, making it look like it was brand new and not centuries old. But the most significant thing of all was how the cloud could affect anyone who came into contact with it. It was the perfect deterrent to intruders, and if you could break through it, you could be hidden away from anyone on the outside world. But if it was defenses he was worried about, the Sierra Madre had that covered as well, as the whole of its area was filled with perfected versions of the technology from the Big Empty. Invulnerable holograms littered the land, protecting it from anyone that wanted to cause harm, and Elijah found out that if he were to place them strategically within areas, these perfected holograms could become his army, a one-man army essentially, as no one could harm them at all. But despite all of that, there was one piece of technology that amazed Elijah more than anything, and that was the Sierra Madre vending machines. Utilizing the Sierra Madre's own economy, these machines would be fed on Sierra Madre chips, which were made up of various raw materials, and then when placed inside, the machine would be able to use their composition to assemble various items from alcohols to clothes. Pre-war, these machines had been used for medical needs by the inhabitants that once lived here, but now Elijah could use them himself for whatever he had in mind, with most of his plans being much larger than just medical supplies. With these machines, Elijah could craft anything he needed for his ultimate plan to come to fruition. Here he could craft food, supplies, ammunition, explosive collars, and even his own economy. With this in mind, everything was finally falling into place. He could cleanse the Mojave completely, utilizing the cloud to create a new world, using the holograms as his army, the collars to make sure people followed his every word, and making everyone use the vending machines for resources. It all seemed perfect. It was everything he had hoped for and more, but Elijah had just one issue. To access all of these things, he had to get into the casino's vault. Without that, he could not access any of its resources and technology. But there was also another problem. Elijah could not open this vault alone. He needed outside assistance, but this wasn't too much of a problem in his eyes. This is where the collars came into play. Using the Sierra Madre signal that he first heard back when he entered the area, Elijah would go on to lure unsuspecting victims who believed they could get rich off of the luxuries at the Sierra Madre, and when getting to the signal would have the collars attached to them to do what Elijah wished them to do. This ploy went on for a good while, with many teams being conscripted by Elijah to do his bidding or die. This was all later helped through the discovery of the Nightkin, known as Dog, who was desperate for a master figure, and discovering him, Elijah was able to have Dog start the chain by bringing in new team members each time, and the best thing about him was he was completely loyal, believing Elijah to be his true master, and with that, he did not necessarily need a collar on him at all time. But whilst this seemed like the perfect plan, human nature got in Elijah's way, as the fortune hunters were all too greedy and wanted the treasure for themselves the closer they got, eventually leading to them taking out one another in the pursuit of glory. After a few attempts, one team seemed to be going well as they got Elijah into the heart of the casino, but once again the team would fight it out, causing all of them to die, and with it, Elijah was trapped inside the casino itself, completely on his own. Elijah knew this plan of getting teams to do the work for him needed to change. Every single time they were killing each other, meaning the plan could just never work. Whilst trapped within the casino himself, he came up with a condition for all those that made it into the area. This condition was attached to the collar and was simple. If one person dies during their task, they would all die, forcing the fortune hunters into working together, or they would simply die together. Elijah did have one vital flaw in all of this now though, and that was that he had no way of communicating to Dog on the outside, making it hard to really get anything done, and because of this, Elijah assumed this was his end. His ambition of making the Mojave his own and seeking revenge on the NCR was never going to happen, and the Sierra Madre, a place that housed the best technology ever, something that Elijah could have only dreamed about, was to be his tomb. But this was not the end, as luckily for Elijah, Doc had found a new victim who had followed the signal of the Sierra Madre and captured a new prisoner. But this one was different. This prisoner came to equipped with a Pip-Boy 3000, something Elijah could use to communicate with them and guide them on their travels, as well as speak once again with his servant dog. Elijah realized he could be saved, and with the courier's help, he could be free from his tomb. But could he leave whilst all of that technology was sitting there, ready for someone to use it all? This was something he had to consider. Eventually, Elijah would guide the courier as well as 3 other individuals who wore the last 3 collars within the Sierra Madre. Those individuals being the heavily experimented on mute individual of Christine Royce, Dean Domino, a surviving inhabitant of the Sierra Madre who worked there during its golden days before the Great War, and his ever loyal servant dog. This was a good situation for Elijah, as the courier was eventually able to make it to the casino itself and eventually the vault below, freeing Elijah and coming face to face with his savior. But the benefits of the vault were still right there in front of him. This was his chance to gain everything for himself and bring about a new world for him, and to seek his revenge against the NCR. But the fate of the Sierra Madre and the Mojave would be in the hands of the courier once again. Would they side with Elijah and form a new world utilizing the cloud? Would they not see eye to eye and engage in conflict? Or would the courier lock Elijah away once again within the vault to eventually die? And when he does die in there, have his spirit in the form of a hologram roam the Sierra Madre for eternity? The choice would be down to them. But in the end, it's safe to say that Father Elijah's influence on the world was unlike anyone else's. A man filled with such hatred for the NCR and a never-ending need to become the best anyone could be makes him extremely dangerous. The means he would go to get his way are almost unthinkable, with him wanting to completely coat the earth in the mysterious red cloud and have an army of holograms do his bidding, with those that follow him wearing collars 24/7 to make sure that they do indeed follow him. If the courier were to side with him, the world as we know it in the year of 2287 would be an even darker place than it is now, with not much hope for humanity once again. But maybe, just maybe, the Sierra Madre is the best place for Father Elijah to die, surrounded by the technology he most desperately wants, but although he is right there with it, he is unable to grab it for himself. A poetic ending to a man that would do anything for power and getting the one-up on anyone that challenges him. But for now, this has been the story behind the intellectual genius, albeit terrifying individual, known as Father Elijah. So that is the story of Father Elijah, the once member of the Brotherhood and now an outcast looking to get his revenge on the world. Arguably one of the best villains within the Fallout series and part of one of my favourite DLCs they've ever released. Dead Money. I want to say a huge thank you to you for watching this video, as well as my amazing patrons who allow me to make videos like this, including our small fishes, my big fishes Christopher, Last Persona User and Arto Creme, my YouTube channel Wise Ones, Fiery Italian, Ico the Wolf and Sith Lord 906, my sharks Wow Such Gaming and Jason X117, and my Megalodons Sinus, Jacob Garcia and Chernobyl Stalker. If you also want to support this channel, you can find the link in the description below, but if not, please do leave a like, check out my other lore videos, leave a subscribe if you haven't already, support me through buying yourself a tub of G Fuel with my link, and why not leave a nice comment to help get this video out there. They're also really nice to read, so that would be nice. But that's all for now. Stay safe out there and see you all in the next one. Cheers.